The encrypted message arrived at 0400 hours on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and the weight of a crown. Marcus Ashford had never wanted. He sat alone in the royal study, nursing cold coffee and the kind of insomnia that came with ruling 6 territories and 60,000 wolves, who looked to him for leadership he still felt unqualified to provide. Outside his window, the northern kingdom stretched dark and quiet under a moonless sky. 3 million acres of mountain and forest, and packlands that had been his responsibility for 5 years now, ever since his father's death, put a crown on his head and expectations on his shoulders. The tablet screen glowed pale blue in the darkness. Marcus watched the decoded text materialize line by line, each word appearing with the mechanical precision of royal encryption software doing its work. He had received secure messages at odd hours before. 5 years as Alpha King meant that emergencies did not respect the sleep schedule of monarchs. But this one felt different even before he read the contents. The sender code was flagged with triple priority markers, High Council authority, sealed by Lord Regent Voss himself. His left leg ached where the old war wounds never quite healed right. Marcus shifted in the leather chair that had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that, trying to find a position that did not make the scar tissue pull. The injury was a souvenir from the border wars 10 years ago, back when he was just a prince fighting alongside common soldiers, because his father believed royalty should bleed with their people. He had learned what shrapnel felt like, what it meant to watch friends die, what it cost to give orders that sent good wolves into situations they might not survive. And now he was about to give another order that would end a life. Execute. Prisoner 447R within 3 days. Witness termination required. Body to be cremated immediately. Ashes scattered per Protocol 9. No exceptions. Authority. High Council. Lord Regent Voss presiding. Confirmation code follows. Marcus read it twice. Then he read it again, looking for the error that had to be there. In 5 years as king, he had signed exactly 3 execution orders. 2 had been for rogues who slaughtered human families in bloodlust frenzies, beyond all hope of rehabilitation. 1 had been for a wolf who tried to expose their kind to the media, threatening the fragile peace between their world and the one that surrounded them. Each time, Marcus had done his duty. Each time, the weight of it had stolen sleep from him for weeks afterward. But this felt wrong in his bones, the way weather turned before a storm. He pulled up the prisoner file, such as it was. Most of it came through redacted. Black bars covered names, locations, incident details. What remained was sparse enough to fit on a single screen. Female, age 29, convicted of murdering her commanding officer and 12 packmates during a training exercise 6 years ago. Held in Black Ridge, secure wing of the Royal Palace complex, deemed irredeemable, classified as permanent threat to kingdom security. 6 years. She had been in the deepest cells of his own palace for 6 years, and now, suddenly, she needed to die within 72 hours. Marcus reached for his phone, then stopped. At this hour, most of his court would be asleep. But there was one man who never slept much anymore. One man who had served his father and now served him. One man who had been there in the border wars, who had pulled Marcus out of that burning outpost with shrapnel in both their bodies. Lord Regent Richard Voss answered on the second ring. His voice came through rough with late-night business and something that might have been weariness or resignation. "Your Majesty," he said, and Marcus could hear him sitting up straighter even over the phone. The old formality that never quite disappeared no matter how many times Marcus told him to drop it in private. "I figured you would call." "You knew about this order," Marcus said. It was not a question. A pause. "Then I recommended it to the council." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Why now? She has been locked up for 6 years. What changed? "Nothing changed, Your Majesty. That is the problem." Voss exhaled, and Marcus could picture him in his office in the administrative wing, surrounded by the endless paperwork of running a kingdom, while the king tried to be more than a figurehead. "We have tried everything, every rehabilitation protocol the royal physicians could devise, therapy, meditation, alchemical intervention. She attacked 3 guards last month, put one in the infirmary for a week. The evaluation came back worse than ever. There is nothing left to salvage." "Then why not let her rot in a cell? Why execute now?" "Because she is dangerous, Your Majesty. Because keeping her alive is a liability we can no longer afford. Because sometimes mercy is a quick death. You know that as well as I do. You learned it in the same place as I did." Marcus did know. He had learned it in border forts where mercy often looked like violence, and the kindest thing you could do for a dying wolf was make it quick. But this still felt wrong in a way he could not quite articulate. "Why me?" Marcus asked. "You have executioners on staff, royal guard who are trained for this. Because you are the king. Because the sentence must be carried out by the highest authority to be legitimate under ancient law. And because," Voss added, his voice dropping to something quieter, "you knew her once. Briefly. Do you remember?" Marcus frowned, searching his memory. "I do not. 6 years ago you visited Black Ridge for an inspection of the secure facilities. Your father had just died. You were newly crowned and wanted to understand every aspect of the palace. She was being transferred in that day. You would have seen her in processing. Just a glimpse." Marcus had no memory of it. 6 years ago felt like another lifetime. That was before the crown stopped feeling like a costume and started feeling like a cage. Before he understood what it meant to be responsible for 60,000 lives and have no one to share that burden with, because kings stood alone. "I do not remember," he said. Voss was quiet for a moment. "She will not remember you either." The trauma fractured her memory. "But I thought you should know, Your Majesty. You are not executing a stranger. You are ending the suffering of someone who used to be a soldier. Someone who served your father's kingdom. Someone like us." Marcus looked out the window at the palace grounds, dark and manicured and perfect. Somewhere beneath his feet, in cells he had never visited because Voss handled the security wing, a woman was counting down her last days. "If I am going to do this," Marcus said carefully, "I need to see the full file, not the redacted version. Your Majesty, I need to know what she did. You taught me that in the border wars. Know your enemy, know the mission, no exceptions." Voss sighed, and it sounded like the weight of years. "The file is classified for reasons of kingdom security, but I will authorize a verbal briefing when you arrive. Will that suffice?" "When do you expect me?" "Tomorrow. I will clear my schedule." "And Your Majesty," his voice softened in a way that reminded Marcus of the man who had carried him half a mile with shrapnel in his own leg, who had taught him how to fight and how to lead. "I am sorry this falls on you, but there is no one I trust more to do it right." The call ended. Marcus sat in the silence of the royal study, watching the sky begin its slow shift from black to gray. In an hour, Captain Elena Cross of the Royal Guard would arrive for their morning briefing. In 2 hours, the palace would wake and the daily business of governing a kingdom would begin. But for now, Marcus was alone with a decision that was not really a decision at all. Orders were orders. He had built his life on that foundation, first as a soldier, then as a prince, now as a king. He just wished it did not feel like standing on sand. The drive to the Black Ridge wing took no time at all because it was inside the palace complex, deep beneath the administrative buildings where the public never went. Marcus walked the corridors alone in the gray light before dawn, refusing the escort that protocol demanded. He needed to think, needed to understand why every instinct he had was screaming that something about this was fundamentally wrong. The palace was a city unto itself. The public wings where he held court and received visiting alphas, the residential wings where nobility lived in luxury, the administrative wings where Voss and his staff managed the machinery of government, and beneath it all, the secure facilities, Black Ridge, where threats to the kingdom were contained. Marcus had been king for 5 years and had never visited the deep cells. His father had always said that some burdens were best delegated, that a king should not dirty his hands with the details of how order was maintained. Marcus had accepted that wisdom because his father had been a good king, beloved by his people, respected by his enemies. But now, walking through corridors that grew colder and darker with each descending level, Marcus wondered what else his father had delegated. What else had been hidden in the name of protecting the crown? Voss met him at the entrance to the secure wing, and for a moment Marcus was struck by how much older the man looked. It had been perhaps a month since they last spoke in person. The Lord Regent had always been built solid, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked like he could still fight despite his 62 years. That had not changed. But there were new lines around his eyes, new gray in his close-cropped hair. The weight of command, Marcus knew, showed itself in a man's face. "Your Majesty," Voss said, bowing slightly. A gesture that always made Marcus uncomfortable because this was the man who had taught him to fight, who had saved his life. The formality felt wrong between them. "Please," Marcus said, "just us, no titles." Voss smiled briefly. "Old habits." He gestured down the corridor. "Come, I will show you what we have built." They walked through security checkpoints that Marcus had not known existed. Retinal scanners, voice recognition, silver-lined doors that would stop even an alpha in full rage. The smell hit Marcus as soon as they entered the main corridor of the secure wing. It was not quite right. Beneath the industrial cleaners and the recycled air, there was something else. Something that made his wolf stir uneasily inside him. Fear, pain, and underneath that, something chemical that he could not quite identify, but that set his teeth on edge. "This wing houses 43 prisoners," Voss explained as they walked past cell blocks. "The most dangerous wolves in the kingdom. Murderers, traitors, those who cannot be rehabilitated and cannot be released. We keep them contained. We keep them controlled. We keep the kingdom safe." Through reinforced windows, Marcus caught glimpses of prisoners. They were too quiet, too still. Most facilities had background noise, the murmur of voices, the sound of movement. Black Ridge felt muffled, like a held breath or a scream cut short. "You run a very clean operation," Marcus said, keeping his tone neutral. "We run necessary protocols." Voss stopped at a door marked Medical Research, authorized personnel only. "These are not common criminals, Your Majesty. They require specialized management." He opened the door. Inside was a medical facility that looked more like something from a research laboratory than a prison. Examination rooms, equipment that gleamed under harsh lights, rows of vials and compounds in locked cabinets. "We have made significant advances in behavioral management," Voss said, and there was pride in his voice. "Traditional rehabilitation does not work for wolves with severe trauma or psychological damage. So we developed new approaches: alchemical stabilization, neurological intervention, controlled modification therapy." Marcus looked at a table covered in syringes and bottles filled with liquids that ranged from clear to dark amber. "What kind of alchemy?" "Proprietary compounds. Wolfsbane derivatives, carefully calibrated to suppress aggression without causing permanent harm. They stabilize mood, reduce violent impulses, make the subjects more manageable." "Subjects?" Marcus repeated quietly. Voss met his eyes. "Prisoners, Your Majesty. I misspoke." But Marcus had heard the slip, and it bothered him in ways he could not quite articulate. "You use these on all inmates?" "Only the severe cases. Those who pose ongoing threats." Voss gestured to a monitor showing what looked like brain activity scans. "We have achieved a 78% reduction in violent incidents since implementing the program. And the other 22%? We are still refining the protocols." Marcus looked at the medical equipment again, at the gleaming, sterile surfaces and the locked cabinets marked with warning symbols. It was impressive. It was thorough. It was also deeply unsettling in a way that reminded him of stories his grandmother used to tell about the old kingdoms, the ones that fell because they confused control with wisdom. "Where is the prisoner I am meant to execute?" he asked. Voss's expression shifted, back to the business at hand. "Solitary wing, deepest level. I will take you there. But Your Majesty, before we go, I need you to understand something." He stopped, choosing his words with care. "What you are about to see will be difficult. She is not the soldier she used to be. The years have broken something fundamental. What remains is dangerous and beyond reach." "You keep saying that, but I need to see for myself." "Of course, Your Majesty." Voss started walking again, leading Marcus deeper into the complex. "Just remember that sometimes mercy looks like an ending." They descended 3 more levels. The air grew colder with each floor, the chemical smell stronger, the lights fewer and farther between, creating pools of shadow between islands of harsh illumination. At the end of a corridor that felt more like a tomb than a hallway, a reinforced door waited with 2 guards stationed outside. The guards straightened when they saw Marcus, eyes widening in recognition and shock. The king did not come to Black Ridge. The king did not descend to these depths. Their confusion was visible, but they knew better than to question. Voss nodded to them and they stepped aside. The cell beyond was small, 10 feet by 10 feet. Stone walls, a narrow cot, a steel toilet. And sitting on the edge of the cot, absolutely still, was a woman counting ceiling tiles. Marcus stepped inside, and she did not look at him. She just kept counting, her lips moving silently. Her dark hair was cut short, practical and severe. She wore gray prison clothing that hung loose on a frame that looked 20 pounds too light. Her skin was pale, the kind of pale that came from years without real sunlight. And her wrists, where they rested on her knees, were marked with the telltale scars of silver restraints, healed but never truly gone. 2,847, she said quietly, her voice rough from disuse. "That is how many times I have counted them, once for each day." "Prisoner 447R, Voss said from the doorway. "You have a visitor." She looked up then, and Marcus saw her eyes. Hazel, sharp, despite the exhaustion that shadowed them like bruises. They tracked over him with the precision of someone assessing a threat, cataloging details, calculating angles. It was the look of a trained fighter, even after 6 years in a cell. "You are my executioner," she said. "It was not a question. I am Alpha King Marcus Ashford. I am here to review your case." She almost smiled. It was a terrible thing, that almost smile, like watching someone remember how the expression worked but not why anyone would bother. "There is no case. I killed them. Captain Sarah Thorne and 12 wolves under her command. I deserve this." But her heartbeat spiked as she said it. Marcus heard it clearly, the jump in rhythm that meant stress or fear or lies. His wolf stirred inside him, restless in a way he had not felt in years. "Why?" he asked, ignoring Voss's presence behind him. The woman looked down at her hands. They were thin, the bones too prominent. "I do not remember. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." She met his eyes again, and there was something raw in her gaze. Something that spoke of nights without sleep and questions without answers, and a kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical. "They showed me photographs, blood everywhere, bodies torn apart, my scent on everything. I must have done it. But when I try to remember, there is just nothing. A gap where memory should be, like someone cut it out." Marcus studied her. He had interrogated enough people in the border wars to know the difference between a practiced lie and genuine confusion. This felt like the latter. "Stand up," he said. She hesitated, muscles tensing like she expected violence. Then slowly she rose. Even malnourished and exhausted, she moved with a kind of controlled grace that spoke of training. Combat training. "Turn around." She turned slowly, and Marcus saw her back through the thin fabric of the prison shirt. He went very still. Scars covered her skin from shoulders to waist. But these were not random marks of violence or punishment. They were precise, methodical, repeating patterns that formed something almost geometric, like a language written in pain. Marcus recognized them from classified briefings he had received about interrogation techniques used by enemy kingdoms during the border wars. Behavioral modification through systematic torture, a way to break someone's will and rebuild it according to someone else's design. This was not punishment for a crime, this was programming. He looked at Voss, keeping his expression neutral despite the rage building in his chest. "May I speak with you outside, Lord Regent?" Voss nodded. The woman sat back down on her cot and resumed counting tiles, as if the interruption had never happened. In the corridor, with the guards out of earshot, Marcus kept his voice low and deadly calm. "Those scars. That is not standard discipline." Voss's jaw tightened. "Enhanced interrogation techniques. Early in her imprisonment, we needed information about her alleged rogue network. The methods were approved by the High Council under emergency security provisions. For 6 years, she was resistant to standard protocols. Some prisoners require extended intervention to ensure they are not a threat." "Intervention," Marcus said. "You call that intervention. What would you call it, Your Majesty? She murdered 13 wolves, her own packmates, her commanding officer. Should we have simply asked her nicely to tell us why? I would call it torture, and I would expect my Lord Regent to know the difference." They stared at each other. Two men who had fought together, bled together, now on opposite sides of a line neither wanted to acknowledge existed. "I need to see the full file," Marcus said. "Everything, or I do not proceed with this execution. The file is classified for kingdom security. Then declassify it. You want me to kill this woman on your word alone. I need to know exactly what she is supposed to have done. Not the summary, not the redacted version. Everything." Voss studied him for a long moment. Then he pulled out a tablet, typed in a series of codes with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from doing something often, and handed it over. "1 hour, Your Majesty. Read it here. It does not leave this wing." Marcus took the tablet and found an empty office. The file was extensive, hundreds of pages of reports and evidence and testimony. He started with her service record. Rowan. No family name listed, which was unusual for military personnel. Exemplary marks across 6 years of service, top of her class in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, recruited for elite operations at 23, 6 years of flawless service before the incident that ended everything. Then he reached the incident report and the wrongness intensified. Mission: High-value reconnaissance, Zone 7, classified location under Royal Security Seal. Team lead: Captain Sarah Thorne. Objective: assess abandoned border facility for potential threats or intelligence value. And then chaos in text form. Team went dark. No communication for 18 hours. When the recovery unit arrived, they found carnage. 12 bodies, all killed by wolf attacks. Thorne and her entire unit dead. And in the center of it all, unconscious and covered in blood, was Rowan. The evidence section was thorough to the point of obsession. Forensics matched her prints, her DNA, her scent markers to the scene. 2 survivors from a support unit stationed outside the facility corroborated that no one else entered or left during the critical window. Security footage showed her team going in. It showed no one else. But what the file did not show was motive, or method, or any explanation for why an elite soldier with 6 years of exemplary service would suddenly slaughter her entire team, including a commanding officer she had served under for 3 years without a single disciplinary incident. Marcus kept reading. The psychological evaluations painted a picture that grew more disturbing with each page. Subject claims no memory of events, exhibits severe post-traumatic responses, resistant to therapy, deemed high risk for future violent episodes, recommended for indefinite containment. And then buried in a subsection marked medical interventions and treatment protocols, he found it. Subject has been administered behavioral stabilization compounds since intake. Weekly injections of alchemical compound designation Epsilon 7 to manage violent tendencies and suppress fugue states. Treatment ongoing. No end date established. Monitoring continues. Marcus sat back in the chair. Epsilon 7. He did not recognize the designation, but the pattern was clear. They had been drugging her from day one. For 6 years they had been injecting her with compounds designed to suppress and control, compounds that were listed as experimental in the medical notes, compounds that had never been approved for long-term use. He thought about the 2 quiet prisoners he had seen, the chemical smell in the air, the medical wing that looked like a research facility, and he thought about the woman in the cell, counting tiles because it was the only thing she had left to count. His phone buzzed. Elena, right on schedule for her morning check-in. The captain of his Royal Guard was nothing if not punctual. "I am in Black Ridge," he texted back, reviewing the execution order. "We'll brief you later." "Everything okay?" Her response came immediately. He looked at the tablet screen, at the words that did not quite add up to truth. "No," he typed, "but I am handling it." He went back to the cell. Rowan looked up as he entered, and there was something different in her eyes now. Not hope exactly, but a kind of wary curiosity, like someone who had learned not to expect mercy, but could still recognize when the rules might be changing. "What is your full name?" Marcus asked. She blinked, surprised. "Prisoner 447R. Not your designation, your name." A pause, like she was testing whether the question was a trap. Then quietly, "Rowan." "Just Rowan? I had a family name once. I do not remember it anymore. The drugs make everything before the cell feel like it happened to someone else." "Rowan," Marcus said, sitting in the single chair someone had placed in the corner. "I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer honestly, even if the answers are difficult. Can you do that? Are you still going to kill me after?" "I do not know yet, but I promise you will get a fair hearing, which is more than you have had in 6 years." That surprised her into something that might have been respect. Most people lie. They promise things they cannot deliver. You are honest. I try to be. Now these injections they have been giving you, what do they tell you they are for? Behavioral stabilization, to keep me from hurting people, to stop the violent episodes. Do you feel violent right now in this moment? She considered the question seriously, like it mattered. "No. I feel tired. I feel like I am underwater and the surface keeps getting farther away no matter how hard I try to reach it. But not violent." "When was the last time you felt truly angry?" She thought about it for a long moment. "I do not remember. Everything is very flat now, like someone turned down the volume on all my emotions until there is nothing left but gray." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Rowan, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. Those injections are not just for stabilization. They are experimental compounds designed to suppress memory and emotional response. They have been using them on you for 6 years, without your informed consent." He watched her process that information, saw the moment it clicked into place. "That is why I cannot remember," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That is why everything before the cell feels like a dream. They have been erasing me." "It is possible." Marcus pulled up the tablet, showed her the medical records he had photographed with his phone. "These compounds, Epsilon 7 and the others, they are not approved for long-term use. They are not even approved for human trials in most kingdoms, but someone authorized using them on you." Her hands started to shake. She pressed them flat against her thighs, fighting for control. "Why? If I am just a murderer they plan to execute anyway, why go to all this effort?" "That," Marcus said, "is exactly what I intend to find out." He stood and went to the door, knocked once. The guard opened it immediately. "I need to speak with Lord Regent Voss. Now. And I am taking prisoner 447R into my personal custody under royal authority. Prepare transfer paperwork." "Your Majesty," the guard stammered, "that requires the Lord Regent's approval." "The Lord Regent serves at my pleasure," Marcus said, letting a fraction of his alpha authority bleed into his voice. The guard's eyes widened and he bowed quickly. "I am the king. She is now under my protection. Make it happen." The guard fled. Rowan stared at Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. a mixture of confusion and disbelief and something that might have been the beginning of hope after 6 years of having none. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because something about this whole situation makes my wolf want to fight," Marcus said. "And because you were a soldier once. Soldiers deserve better than what you have gotten here. Better than torture and drugs and being erased one injection at a time." Voss arrived within minutes, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Your Majesty, the guard said you are transferring the prisoner? I am taking her into protective custody for 24 hours while I complete my investigation. There are irregularities in her case that require clarification before I can authorize execution." "What irregularities?" "The fact that she has been chemically suppressed for 6 years using experimental compounds. The fact that her trial was sealed. The fact that a soldier with 6 years of exemplary service supposedly killed her entire team without motive or prior warning. All of that, Voss, raises questions." "The questions have been answered by the High Council, Your Majesty. The evidence was reviewed. The conviction was sound." "Then 24 hours will not change anything, will it?" Marcus kept his voice level. "I am exercising royal prerogative. She comes with me. If the case is as clear as you say, my investigation will confirm it, and the execution proceeds. If not, we have larger problems." Voss looked like he wanted to argue, but Marcus was the king, and in the end that meant something even to a Lord Regent who had served his father. 24 hours, Voss said. "Then she returns here and the sentence is carried out." "Those are council orders, Your Majesty." "Understood," Marcus said. Within the hour, Rowan was transferred to the Royal Physician's Wing under heavy guard. Marcus had her placed in a secure room that was still a cell, but at least had windows and clean sheets and the smell of something other than chemicals and despair. Captain Elena Cross met him outside the medical wing. She was in her guard uniform, her expression professionally neutral, but Marcus had known her for 15 years and could read the concern underneath. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "what are we doing?" "We are finding out if I have been signing execution orders for innocent people." He looked through the observation window at Rowan, who sat on the medical bed staring at sunlight like she had forgotten what it looked like. "Get me Dr. Halloway, the best toxicologist we have. I need to know what they have been putting in her system and whether it can be reversed. And if it can be, then we find out what she really remembers. And we figure out why someone wanted her memories erased badly enough to torture her for 6 years. Elena was quiet for a moment. "The Lord Regent is not going to like this." "The Lord Regent," Marcus said, "can take it up with me directly if he has concerns. I am the king. That still means something in my own palace." He went into the medical room. Rowan looked up and there was a question in her eyes. "Dr. Halloway is coming," Marcus told her. "We are going to try to clear the compounds from your system. It will not be pleasant. The withdrawal might be severe, but if you consent, we can try." "And then what? When the drugs are gone and I remember what I did? Then we deal with the truth, whatever it is." Marcus sat in the chair by the window. "But Rowan, I need you to understand something. If you truly killed those wolves, if the memories come back and confirm the charges, I will have to carry out the sentence. I cannot protect you from justice if you are actually guilty." She nodded slowly. "I understand. And for what it is worth, I would rather know the truth and die for it than live in this gray nothing forever." "Fair enough." Dr. Halloway arrived with his medical team. They examined Rowan, took blood samples, ran tests that Marcus did not fully understand but trusted the royal physician to interpret correctly. After an hour, Halloway pulled Marcus aside. His expression was grave. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "she has enough wolfsbane variant in her bloodstream to kill a normal wolf. The only reason she is alive is because the doses were carefully calibrated and administered over years. Her body has adapted, but barely. And underneath the wolfsbane, there are at least 3 other compounds I cannot immediately identify. Memory suppressants, almost certainly, but also something that looks designed to block neural pathways related to emotional processing and possibly mate bond recognition." "Mate bond recognition," Marcus repeated. "Yes, Your Majesty. It is highly experimental alchemy, but the theory is that certain compounds can prevent a wolf from recognizing their fated mate, even if they are in close proximity. The applications for royal security are obvious, preventing political complications from inconvenient mate bonds, but it has never been approved for use because the long-term effects are unknown. Can you flush her system? Yes, but it will not be pleasant. Withdrawal from long-term wolfsbane exposure is violent and painful, and if her memories return, they will return all at once. It could be psychologically devastating. Do it, Rowan said from the bed. She had clearly been listening. I do not care how bad it is. I need to know. Holloway looked at Marcus. Your Majesty? Proceed, Marcus said. But I stay with her through it, and if it becomes life-threatening, you stop. As you command, Your Majesty. The detoxification began at sunset. They gave Rowan compounds to help flush her system, to protect her organs from the shock, to manage the pain as well as they could. Then there was nothing to do but wait and watch as 6 years of chemical control started breaking down. The first hour was the worst for Speed. Rowan's body started rejecting everything almost immediately. She convulsed so hard Marcus had to hold her shoulders to keep her from falling off the bed. Her temperature spiked to dangerous levels. Sweat soaked through the medical gown and the sheets beneath her. Hour 2 brought screaming. Not words, just raw sound that came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Marcus had heard wolves scream like that in the border wars when the medics ran out of pain management, and there was nothing left but survival and suffering. He sat beside her and kept his voice steady, kept talking even though he did not know if she could hear him through the fever and the pain. You are doing well, he told her. You are strong. This is the hard part, but you are going to make it through. Just hold on. Hour 4 was vomiting. Hour 6 was when her wolf tried to surface for the first time in 6 years, triggered by the instinct to shift and heal. But 6 years of suppression had left her wolf weak and confused. The partial transformation was agonizing, bones lengthening and cracking before sliding back to human form, her spine arching in ways that should not have been possible. Marcus used his alpha authority then, the royal command that resonated deeper than hearing. Hold form, stay human, anchor to my voice and hold. It worked enough to keep her from tearing herself apart. But the cost was that she felt everything with human nerves instead of the higher pain tolerance of wolf form. Hour 9, she begged him to kill her. Hour 10, she cried out for her mother, who Holloway's records showed had died 12 years ago. Hour 12, she slept for 20 minutes, the first real sleep, and woke screaming from nightmares. Holloway worked through all of it with focused intensity, monitoring vitals, adjusting treatments, keeping Rowan alive through a process that seemed designed to kill her. At hour 15, her system finally started to stabilize. The fever broke, the convulsions became tremors, and in hour 16, with her eyes finally clear, the memories came flooding back. Marcus watched as her expression changed from confusion to horror to rage in the space of seconds. She sat up suddenly, gasping. It was Voss, she said, her voice hoarse but clear. It was all Voss. And then she told him everything. 6 years ago. The mission to Zone 7. Captain Thorne's team finding something they were not supposed to find. A facility beneath an abandoned border fort. Labs running experiments on captured wolves. Conditioning programs. Research into behavioral modification and mate bond exploitation. Files marked with royal seals that should not have existed. They were going to report it. Going to bring the evidence to the king. Marcus's father had been alive then. A good king who would have shut it down immediately. But someone knew they had found it. Someone sent soldiers, not rogues, with royal insignia and orders to eliminate all witnesses. Rowan had been tackled, drugged, forced to watch as her team was slaughtered. The last thing she remembered before waking up in Black Ridge was Voss's voice. Make it look like she snapped. Frame her for the murders. She is perfect for our purposes. We can use her later. Use her for what? Marcus asked, though he was starting to understand. Rowan met his eyes. For you. The words hung between them. Then she explained. The files she had seen in that hidden facility. research into identifying mate bonds before they manifested, pheromone analysis, genetic markers, ways to predict who would be fated to whom. They knew, she said. Even 6 years ago, they knew I was your mate. Your father was still alive and you were still a prince, but they were planning ahead, keeping me as leverage for when you took the throne. As she spoke, Marcus became aware of something changing in the air between them. A warmth, a pull. His wolf stirred in a way it never had before, surging forward with recognition. And then the mate bond hit them both like lightning. It was not subtle. It was every nerve in Marcus's body suddenly remembering something they had been trying to tell him. The world sharpened. Colors became more vivid. He could hear Rowan's heartbeat, could smell her scent beneath the medical astringents, vanilla and rain, and something uniquely her that made his wolf howl with recognition. Mine, his wolf said with absolute certainty. Ours. Protect. Claim. Across from him, Rowan gasped, her hand going to her chest. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilating as the bond hit her with equal force. No, she whispered. No, that is why they kept me alive. Marcus could barely breathe. The bond sang between them, 6 years delayed, finally free of the chemical suppression that had masked it from both of them. They knew, Rowan said again, and her voice broke. They tortured me for 6 years, kept me in a cell, fed me drugs, all to have leverage against you when you became king, to control you through me. The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. If Voss had his mate, he could manipulate the king, could force compliance on policies, could threaten her to ensure royal cooperation with whatever agenda he was pursuing. The phone on the medical table buzzed. Marcus picked it up. A message from Elena. Your Majesty, royal guards are mobilizing. Voss has declared the prisoner stolen and is demanding her immediate return. He has council authority. They are coming. Marcus looked at Rowan, at his mate, at the woman who had been tortured in his own palace while he sat on a throne and signed papers and never knew. He made a decision. Get up, he told her. We are leaving. Where? Anywhere but here. He pulled her to her feet. Because Voss is coming, and I am not letting him take you back to that cell. Your Majesty, she said, and there was fear in her voice, but also something else. If you run, you lose the throne. You lose everything. I already lost everything the day I let someone torture my mate in my own palace and did not even know to look for her. Marcus grabbed her hand. The bond flared at the contact. Now we find out what else I have been blind to. They ran. The first loyal wolves arrived within the hour after Marcus sent the encrypted call for help. They came not to the palace gates where royal guards loyal to Voss would turn them away and probably arrest them for conspiracy, but to the hidden estate Marcus owned under a false name in the deep forest 20 miles north of the capital. An inheritance from his mother's side, a woman who had been a minor noble before she married the king, and who had believed in keeping assets that the crown could not touch. Even Voss did not know about this property because it had been purchased decades before the royal records were digitized and integrated into the central database. A safe house that Marcus had maintained for years with a small staff loyal to his mother's memory, against a day he hoped would never come, but his mother had warned him might. That day had arrived with the force of a hammer blow. Marcus stood at the second-floor window watching the approach through pre-dawn darkness. His left leg ached from the old war wound, always worse when stress elevated his heart rate and tightened his muscles. He had not slept, had not eaten since the execution order arrived yesterday morning. Time felt strange and elastic, like he was moving through water while the world sped past him. Rowan was asleep upstairs, her body finally giving in to exhaustion after the 18-hour detox had purged 6 years of chemical control from her bloodstream. Marcus could feel her through the mate bond even from a floor away, could sense her dreams, troubled, but not the nightmares she had described from her years in the cell. Progress. Small, fragile progress. Captain Elena Cross came first in the gray light before dawn, still wearing her Royal Guard uniform, but driving her personal truck instead of the official transport that would have tracking devices and communications monitored by Voss's security apparatus. She had responded to Marcus's encrypted message within minutes of him sending it. The message had been brief. Compromised. Need loyal wolves. Mother's forest house. Come armed. Come ready. Come now. Her response had been even briefer. Coming. Bringing others you can trust. Burn your phone. Do not contact me again on royal channels. Marcus had burned the phone in the fireplace and watched the plastic and circuits melt into toxic smoke. Another bridge burned. Another step away from the throne and toward whatever came next. Behind Elena's truck came 3 more vehicles spread out over the next 15 minutes. Wolves Marcus recognized and trusted for different reasons. Lieutenant Sarah Vance, Elena's second-in-command in the Royal Guard, a woman who had lost her husband in the border wars and understood what betrayal by leadership meant. She drove a battered sedan that had seen better days but ran quiet and left minimal digital footprint. Dr. Holloway arrived in his medical van, still equipped with the portable equipment he had used to treat Rowan's detox. The old physician had served Marcus's father for 20 years and Marcus for 5 more. He had presided over births and deaths in the royal family, had kept secrets that would have destroyed lesser houses. If he was here, it meant he believed Marcus was right to defy Voss. That meant more than Marcus could easily express. And last came Logan Thorne, a grizzled veteran of the border wars who had fought beside Marcus's father in conflicts that were now footnotes in history books. He drove an ancient truck that looked like it should have died a decade ago, but somehow kept running through sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. Logan was 60 now, gray-haired and scarred, but he moved with the controlled grace of someone who had never quite left the battlefield behind. He had no official position in the current regime, had refused promotion after his son died in circumstances that were never quite explained to anyone's satisfaction, least of all Logan's. But he still showed up when called, because that was what soldiers did for their brothers. They gathered in the main room of the safe house while Rowan slept upstairs, still recovering. The room was simple, furnished for function rather than the luxury of the palace. Plain wooden furniture, a stone fireplace, windows that could be barricaded if necessary. It felt more honest than the throne room with its gilded everything and portrait of ancestors who had probably been just as flawed as Marcus, but whose flaws had been airbrushed out by history. Marcus stood before them, no longer wearing the formal attire of a king, but simple civilian clothes that Elena had brought. Dark pants, a plain shirt, boots suitable for running or fighting depending on which became necessary first. But despite the casual clothing, the authority in his voice was unmistakable. 5 years wearing a crown left marks that could not be washed away by changing outfits. They gathered in the main room while Rowan slept upstairs, still recovering from 18 hours of chemical purging. Marcus stood before them, no longer wearing the formal attire of a king, but simple clothes that let him move freely. But the authority in his voice was unmistakable. "We do not have much time," he said. "Voss will mobilize the royal guard within hours. He will declare Rowan stolen property and me either insane or compromised by an enemy agent. The council will believe him because they always do. We need to move fast." "Your Majesty," Logan said, and the old soldier's voice carried the weight of decades serving the crown. "What exactly did you find in that cell?" "Evidence that my Lord Regent has been running experimental programs on prisoners in the palace dungeons. Chemical suppression, behavioral modification, torture masquerading as rehabilitation." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed them the photographs he had taken of Rowan's scars and the medical files, and evidence that he identified my mate bond 6 years ago and kept her imprisoned specifically to use as leverage against me when I took the throne. The room went silent. Then Elena spoke, her voice tight with controlled fury. "He knew about your mate and kept her in a cell for 6 years. Not just kept her, tortured her, erased her memories with experimental alchemy, framed her for murders she did not commit, all to have the perfect weapon to control a king. Sarah Vance looked at the photographs, her expression darkening. These scars. I have seen similar patterns in intelligence reports from enemy kingdoms, behavioral conditioning protocols. Exactly, Marcus said. Someone taught Voss those techniques. Someone gave him access to compounds that should not exist. And someone has been using my palace as a testing ground for methods to control wolves at a fundamental level. Dr. Holloway cleared his throat. Your Majesty, I need to tell you something. When I was treating the prisoner, I found files in the medical database that I was not supposed to access. Research into mate bond suppression, lists of noble bloodlines and their predicted mate matches, alchemical formulae designed to prevent recognition even in close proximity. Why would anyone research that? Sarah asked. Think about it, Elena said grimly. If you can prevent a king from recognizing his mate, you can arrange a political marriage instead. You can control succession. You can manipulate the entire royal line by choosing who they bond with. Or you can threaten the mate they do not know they have, Logan added. Keep her hidden. Use her as leverage without the king even knowing what is being held over him. Marcus felt sick. How many? How many other prisoners in Black Ridge might be mates being kept from their bonded pairs? I do not know, Holloway said. But the research files go back 20 years, your father's reign. My father would never have authorized this. Perhaps not knowingly, Logan said carefully. But your Majesty, Lord Voss served your father for 30 years. He had access to everything. If he told the king that certain security measures were necessary, that certain prisoners required special handling, would your father have questioned it? Marcus remembered his father's philosophy. Some burdens are best delegated. Trust your advisors to handle the details while you focus on the larger vision of the kingdom. It had seemed wise. It had kept his father from being overwhelmed by minutiae. But it had also created blind spots that Voss had exploited. We need proof, Marcus said. Solid evidence that even the council cannot dismiss. Right now, all we have is my word against the Lord Regent's. He has decades of service and their trust. I have been king for 5 years and just committed treason by stealing a condemned prisoner. We need to access the research vault, Holloway said. The deep archives beneath Black Ridge where the original experimental protocols are stored. If we can get those files, we can prove what Voss has been doing. That vault is in the heart of the palace complex, Sarah pointed out. Under heavy guard, there is no way to access it without being detected. There is one way, a voice said from the stairs. They turned. Rowan stood there, still pale and unsteady, but awake and lucid. She had changed into clothes Elena had brought, simple and practical. But her eyes were clear in a way Marcus had not seen before. The drugs were finally purging from her system. You should be resting, Marcus said. I have been resting for 6 years. Rowan descended the stairs slowly. I know the vault. I was held in the deep cells for 3 years before they moved me to the upper level. I memorized the guard rotations, the access codes, the blind spots in the security system. I memorized everything because I knew that someday, somehow, I might need it. Why did they keep you in the deep cells? Elena asked. Because, Rowan said, meeting Marcus's eyes, they were still running tests, trying to figure out exactly how the mate bond worked. Taking my blood, exposing me to your scent through stolen clothing to measure my physiological response. They were not just studying mate bonds in general. They were studying our bonds specifically. Marcus felt rage building in his chest but forced it down. Later. He could be angry later. Right now, they needed to focus. Can you guide a team in? Yes, but it needs to be small. 3 people maximum. Any more and we trigger the weight sensors. I will go, Marcus said. Your Majesty, Logan started. I am going. This is my palace. My responsibility. My failure that this was allowed to happen. Marcus looked at Rowan. You guide us. Elena, you come for security. We go in, we get the files, we get out. When? Tonight. Before Voss can lock down the palace completely. He will expect us to run, to flee the capital. He will not expect us to break back into the place we just escaped from. Madness, Sarah muttered. But it might work. "It has to work," Marcus said, "because if we cannot prove what Voss has done, he controls the narrative. And the narrative will be that I went insane and endangered the kingdom for a woman who murdered 12 loyal wolves." They spent the day planning. Rowan drew maps from memory, marking guard positions, camera blind spots, access routes that had been forgotten by everyone except prisoners who had nothing to do but watch and wait. Logan verified what he could through contacts still loyal to the old king's memory. Elena coordinated timing and equipment. As evening approached, Marcus found Rowan on the back porch, staring at the forest. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger now that the chemicals were clearing her system. He could feel her anxiety like it was his own. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, settling beside her. "About the plan?" "No. About everything else?" "Yes." She looked at him. "You lost your throne for me. You are risking your life for me, and you do not even really know me. I know you survived 6 years of hell. I know you are brave enough to go back into that place. I know you are my mate, and that means something even if we have not had time to explore what. What if the bond is wrong? What if whatever they did to me broke something, and you are bonded to someone who cannot bond back properly? Then we figure it out together." Marcus took her hand. The contact sent warmth through both of them. "But Rowan, I need you to understand something. I am not doing this just because you are my mate. I am doing this because what Voss did is an abomination. Because there are probably other prisoners in those cells who deserve justice. Because a king who cannot protect his own people from torture in his own palace is not worthy of the crown. Even if it costs you everything, especially then." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rowan spoke again, quieter. "When I was in that cell, I used to imagine what you would be like. My mate. I knew the bond existed because I could feel it sometimes, this pull towards something I could not name. I thought maybe you were kind, maybe strong. I never imagined you would be a king. Does that bother you?" "Terrifies me. I am a soldier who cannot even remember her own family name. You rule 6 territories and 60,000 wolves. When this is over, if we survive, what am I supposed to be? Your dirty secret? The mate you keep hidden because I am not suitable for a queen?" Marcus turned to face her fully. "When this is over, you are going to be whatever you choose to be. If you want to be my queen, I will crown you in front of the entire kingdom. If you want to be a soldier again, I will commission you in the royal guard. If you want to walk away from all of this, I will let you go, even if it kills me. But you are not my secret, and you are not my shame. You are my mate, and that makes you precious beyond measure." Tears tracked down her face, but she was smiling. "You are much better at speeches than I expected. 5 years of royal addresses. You pick up a few things." She kissed him then, brief and soft and tentative, like someone learning what touch could mean when it was not connected to pain. The mate bond flared at the contact, warm and right, and everything the poet said it should be. When they broke apart, Rowan rested her forehead against his. "Let us go steal some files and destroy a Lord Regent. Sounds like a perfect second date." The infiltration began at midnight, exactly when the guard shift changed, and there was a precise 6-minute window of chaos and transition that Rowan had observed and memorized over 3 years in the deep cells. 6 minutes when the departing guards were walking toward the exit, and the arriving guards were still getting briefed on overnight protocols. 6 minutes when cameras were temporarily being rerouted through backup systems during mandatory daily maintenance checks. 6 minutes when the palace was as vulnerable as it ever got, which was still more secure than most military installations, but just barely manageable for 3 people who knew exactly what they were doing. They entered through the old aqueduct system that had once supplied water to the palace before modern plumbing made it obsolete 2 centuries ago. The entrance was hidden in a ravine 1/2 mile from the main structure, concealed by undergrowth, and the kind of obscurity that came from being forgotten by everyone except historians and prisoners who had nothing better to do than study ancient palace blueprints during 6 years of isolation. The tunnels were cramped enough that Marcus had to duck and move sideways in places. his shoulders brushing stone walls that wept moisture from the groundwater above. The air smelled of mold and centuries, and the particular decay that came from places humans built and then abandoned to time. Their footsteps echoed despite efforts at stealth. Elena had insisted they wear soft-soled boots and move with deliberate care, but sound carried in these spaces in ways that made Marcus's skin crawl with the certainty that someone somewhere must be hearing them. But no alarms sounded. No guards appeared. They moved through darkness broken only by the dim glow of Elena's shielded flashlight, following Rowan's whispered directions through intersections and branches that looked identical to Marcus, but that Rowan navigated with the confidence of someone who had mapped every inch in her mind. 15 minutes into the tunnels, Rowan held up a hand. "Stop." They froze. Marcus heard it a moment later. Footsteps above them. Guards doing rounds on the level directly overhead. The sound of boots on stone transmitted through the ceiling of the aqueduct like a heartbeat. 1 guard, 2, 3. They passed directly over the infiltration team's position, so close Marcus could hear their muffled conversation. "Did you hear something?" "Just rats. These old sections are full of them. I swear I heard voices." "You are paranoid. No one comes down here. No one even remembers these tunnels exist." The voices faded. Rowan waited a full minute of silence before moving again, even more carefully than before. They emerged in a forgotten storage room 2 levels below the main dungeons, exactly where Rowan had promised. The room was filled with broken furniture and moth-eaten tapestries that had probably been magnificent once, but now served only as evidence of how quickly glory faded when no one bothered to maintain it. A single door led out into the corridor network. Elena moved to the door first, weapon ready, clearing the approach with practiced efficiency. She checked the hallway through the small window, counting seconds, waiting for the patrol pattern Rowan had described. 30 seconds. Clear. They slipped into the corridor and immediately into the gaps between the palace that tourists saw and the palace that actually functioned. Servants' passages, maintenance corridors, the infrastructure that kept the grand illusion running, but that nobles pretended did not exist, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that palaces required work. Rowan guided them through spaces Marcus had never known existed, despite living here his entire life. Through passages behind the main walls, down staircases that connected levels in ways the official maps did not show. Past rooms where heating systems and water treatment and electrical routing happened out of sight of anyone who mattered. 20 minutes of careful movement brought them within sight of the vault door. They paused at an intersection while Rowan verified the next segment was clear. 2 guards, she whispered, stationed at the vault entrance. They rotate every 2 hours. Next rotation is in 18 minutes. We need to neutralize them quietly or find another approach. "How did you plan to get past them when you were planning escape?" Elena asked. "I was not planning to get past them. I was planning to die trying. This is better." "Marginally," Marcus muttered. He studied the corridor ahead. The vault door was visible at the far end, flanked by 2 guards in formal uniform carrying weapons that were very much not ceremonial. Professional soldiers doing a job they took seriously. Marcus recognized their type. Veterans. People who had seen actual combat and did not just stand around looking decorative. "I can distract them," Sarah offered over the comms. "Stage an emergency 2 corridors over. They will have to respond." "And leave the vault unguarded?" Elena shook her head. "Protocol will be to call for backup and maintain position. We need another way." Rowan bit her lip, thinking. "There is a ventilation shaft. Old system. Not on the modern maps. It runs parallel to this corridor and has an access point 15 feet from the vault door. We could bypass the guards entirely." "How did you know about the vent?" "I spent 3 years watching maintenance crews work on the environmental systems. They thought I was unconscious most of the time because of the drugs. I was not. I was watching everything." They backtracked to find the ventilation access point Rowan described. It was exactly where she said it would be, hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wall, but popped open when you knew which corner to press. The shaft beyond was narrow and dark, and looked like it had not been cleaned in decades. Elena went first because she was smallest and most experienced at close-quarters infiltration. Marcus followed, forcing his larger frame through spaces that scraped his shoulders and caught on his clothing. Rowan came last, moving with the eerie silence of someone who had learned to be invisible in order to survive. The shaft ran parallel to the corridor for 50 feet before opening into a small chamber directly adjacent to the vault room. They emerged covered in dust and cobwebs, but undetected. The guards were 20 feet away on the other side of a wall, close enough that Marcus could hear them talking about the upcoming council session and whether the king would actually show his face after the scandal that was apparently already spreading through the palace staff networks. They reached the vault door from the interior approach, bypassing the guards completely. It was not a modern electronic lock. It was old royal security. Blood magic and ancient bindings that required authorization from someone of royal blood. Marcus stepped forward, placed his palm on the door, and spoke the words his father had taught him when he first took the crown, words that were supposed to open any sealed royal space. The door did not move. He tried again. Nothing. Voss changed the protocols, Elena whispered. He locked you out of your own palace. No, Rowan said. She stepped forward, studying the door. Not locked out, redirected. See the sigil? It has been modified. It still recognizes royal blood, but now it requires 2 sources, king and regent together. Can you break it? Rowan examined the lock more closely. Maybe. The blood magic is keyed to genetic markers. If I can trick it into thinking the regent is here, it might open. How? Blood. She looked at Marcus. Voss has been taking your blood for medical records, right? Required annual checkups for the king? Yes, every year. And he has been taking mine for experiments. If both our samples are in the medical database, and if I can access that database through the vault's connection to the palace systems, I might be able to use stored samples to spoof the authorization. That is insane, Elena said. It is brilliant, Marcus corrected. Can you do it? Give me 10 minutes. Rowan worked with focused intensity, using equipment Elena had brought and knowledge from 6 years of watching how the security systems operated. Marcus and Elena kept watch, weapons ready, knowing that every second they stayed increased the chance of discovery. At minute 9, alarms started blaring somewhere distant. We are out of time, Elena said. Almost there. Rowan's fingers moved faster. Come on, come on. The vault door clicked. Then it swung open with a groan of ancient hinges. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence. Not just files, but physical samples. Vials of compounds. Journals in Voss's own handwriting detailing experiments. Photographs of prisoners before and after conditioning. Lists of noble families and their predicted mate bonds going back 20 years. And in the center of it all, a ledger showing payments. Large sums transferred to Voss's personal accounts from someone identified only as VK. Victor Kane, Marcus said, recognizing the initials. Alpha of the Eastern Territories. He has been funding this. Elena was photographing everything with her phone, uploading to encrypted servers outside the palace network. We need to move. Those alarms mean someone knows we are here. They grabbed what they could carry, physical evidence that could not be dismissed as digital forgeries. Then they ran. The corridors erupted with guards. Not just regular palace security, but Voss's personal unit, wolves loyal to the regent rather than the crown. They came in tactical formation, weapons raised, blocking the route back to the aqueduct. Fall back, Elena ordered, firing controlled bursts to suppress the advance. Get to the east wing. There is a service exit near the old kitchens. They fought through corridors Marcus had walked his entire life, now turned into a battlefield. Elena covered their retreat with the calm precision of someone who had done this before. Rowan moved like the elite soldier she had been, no hesitation, just fluid motion and accurate fire. Marcus felt the weight of what was happening. Civil war. Inside his own palace, his people shooting at each other because he had failed to see what was festering beneath his feet. They burst into a large hall and found themselves cut off. 20 guards ahead, 10 behind, trapped. Voss stepped from behind his tactical formation of guards. He was not wearing his formal Lord Regent robes with their embroidered symbols of office and their weight of tradition. Instead, he wore tactical gear that looked military grade, body armor and weapons harness, and boots designed for combat rather than ceremony. A man who had made a decision and was ready to see it through to whatever end came. But his face looked older in the harsh lighting of the hall. Lines that Marcus had not noticed before carved deep around his eyes and mouth. The weight of maintaining secrets, perhaps, or the knowledge that everything was about to crumble and there would be no walking away from this confrontation. "Your Majesty," he said, and there was genuine sadness in his voice that cut deeper than anger would have. "It did not have to be this way. I tried to do this quietly, tried to give you time to understand the necessity of what I built. Time to see that the kingdom requires hard choices and harder men to make them. But you could not leave well enough alone. You had to be the hero. You had to save the girl and expose the evil regent and prove yourself worthy of your father's crown. You tortured my mate for 6 years," Marcus said, and his voice was steady despite the rage simmering beneath his skin like magma waiting to erupt. "You ran experiments on prisoners who had no way to consent or refuse. You betrayed every principle of justice my father claimed this kingdom stood for." "I protected your father's kingdom," Voss said, stepping forward despite the weapons trained on him from multiple angles. "Protected it from the chaos of unchecked mate bonds, disrupting carefully negotiated political alliances that took decades to build. Protected it from wolves whose loyalty could not be guaranteed because biology overrode reason. Protected it from the kind of emotional decisions that start wars and destroy nations. Your father was a great king because he understood that some prices must be paid for stability. Some hands must get dirty so that others can stay clean enough to wear a crown without shame." "My father would have executed you for this," Marcus said. "Your father knew," Voss replied, and the words landed like hammer blows. "Not all the details, I grant you, not the specifics of how the programs operated or which prisoners were selected for which protocols, but he knew about the research, knew about the mate bond suppression experiments. He authorized the original studies 23 years ago because he understood something you have not yet learned. That a kingdom cannot be run on feelings and fate and the random chance of biology. It must be run on control and calculation and the willingness to make choices that keep you awake at night but keep the kingdom safe during the day." "You are lying," Marcus said, but his voice wavered slightly because Voss would not lie about something so easily verified. "Am I?" Voss pulled out a tablet from his tactical vest, called up a document with practiced efficiency, turned the screen to face Marcus. "Authorization for classified research into biological bonding suppression for purposes of kingdom security and prevention of destabilizing mate bonds among noble families and royal succession lines. Dated 23 years ago. Signed by King Gerard Ashford. Your father's signature in his own hand." Marcus stared at the document. The signature looked real. The format matched other royal authorizations he had seen in the archives. The seal was correct, the kind of arcane blood magic imprint that could not be forged without royal DNA. It probably was real, even if he authorized research, Marcus said carefully, fighting to keep his voice level. "That does not justify torture. That does not justify what you did to Rowan. Research into biological mechanisms is one thing. Systematic abuse of prisoners is something else entirely." "Is it?" Voss asked. And there was genuine curiosity in his tone, as if he truly did not understand the distinction Marcus was making. "Where exactly is the line, Your Majesty? We need to understand how mate bonds work if we are going to suppress them. We need subjects to study. We need to test compounds and measure responses and document results. How do you propose we do that without some level of discomfort to the subjects involved?" "Discomfort," Rowan said from where she stood beside Marcus, her voice cold as winter ice. "You call 6 years of chemical suppression and systematic conditioning discomfort. You survived," Voss said, looking at her with something that might have been clinical interest or might have been pity. Marcus could not tell which and was not sure Voss knew either. You are standing here functional, able to form coherent arguments. The protocols worked. Your wolf is intact. Your mind is intact. You were not broken beyond repair. That suggests we calibrated the treatment correctly. I counted ceiling tiles for 6 years because it was the only thing the drugs left me capable of doing, Rowan said. I forgot my own family name. I forgot what sunlight looked like. I forgot how to feel anything except gray nothing. And you stand there and tell me I am intact. Compared to the alternative, yes. Voss's voice was maddeningly calm, the tone of someone explaining basic mathematics to a slow student. If we had simply imprisoned you without the suppression protocols, you would have eventually broken free or driven yourself insane trying. The mate bond to the king would have manifested and caused complications we could not afford. Instead, we kept you stable, controlled, and available for when your usefulness came due. You should be thanking me for the restraint I showed. Marcus felt Elena tense beside him, felt her hand tighten on her weapon. He raised a hand slightly, asking her to wait, letting Voss talk, letting him reveal exactly how twisted his logic had become. What exactly did my father think he was authorizing? Marcus asked. What did you tell him this research was for? Voss smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. The truth, that royal bloodlines needed protection from the randomness of biological bonding. That we could not afford to have kings and queens and heirs mated to commoners or enemies or wolves whose loyalty was questionable. Your father understood that. He saw what happened in the Eastern Kingdom when their crown prince bonded with a rogue's daughter and tore the succession apart trying to claim her. He saw the civil war that followed. He authorized research to ensure that never happened here. And did my father know you planned to keep prisoners as leverage against future kings? He knew that maintaining samples and subjects was necessary for ongoing study. What he chose to understand beyond that, Voss shrugged, was his decision. Your father was brilliant at strategic ignorance, Your Majesty. He could authorize programs without asking questions that would have forced him to stop them. It is a gift that kept this kingdom stable for 40 years, a gift you clearly did not inherit. You control nothing, Marcus said. We have the evidence, the files, the payments from Cain. Everything you built is about to come crashing down, Voss smiled. Evidence that you stole while committing treason. Evidence that will disappear along with you when my guards eliminate the threat you pose to kingdom security. The council will believe my version. They always do. The guards raised their weapons, 20 guns aimed at 3 people who had nowhere to run. Then a voice called out from behind Voss's position. Actually, the council might have questions about that. A figure stepped from the shadows. A woman in her 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing robes that marked her as Alpha Catherine of the Western Territories. Behind her were a dozen wolves in formal diplomatic attire. Alpha. Catherine, Voss said, and for the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. This is a palace security matter. The council was not scheduled to convene until tomorrow. Funny thing about that. Catherine walked forward calmly. When a young wolf shows up at my embassy with photographs of torture chambers and research into controlling royal bloodlines, I tend to move my schedule around. She looked at Marcus. Your Captain Cross is quite resourceful, Your Majesty. She made sure the evidence was distributed before you attempted this foolish infiltration. The files are already out there? Marcus asked. Sent to every alpha in the kingdom, to independent media, to human authorities who monitor supernatural activities. Catherine smiled. You cannot bury this, Voss. Too many people know. Voss's expression hardened. Then I will bury them too. He signaled his guards to fire. But before they could, the doors burst open and more wolves poured in. Not Voss's people. Royal guards loyal to the crown rather than the regent, led by Logan Thorne and Sarah Vance. Stand down, Logan ordered. The king lives. The regent is under arrest for treason. Voss's guards looked confused, torn between training and loyalty. between the man who paid them and the institution they had sworn to serve. Voss pulled a detonator from his pocket. Everyone froze. I built redundancies, Voss said calmly. Explosives throughout the palace. If I cannot have control, no one can. Lower your weapons or I bring down the entire structure. You are bluffing, Marcus said. Am I? Voss smiled. I have spent 20 years preparing for every contingency. Did you really think I would not plan for the day when you finally grew a spine and challenged me? Catherine stepped forward. Lord Regent, there are 78 people in this palace right now. Staff, nobility, children. You would kill them all? To preserve order? Yes, because the alternative is chaos. The alternative is a kingdom ruled by the whims of mate bonds and emotion rather than logic and structure. I will not see everything I built destroyed because a king could not control himself. Rowan spoke then, her voice cutting through the tension. You already destroyed it. The moment you decided that control mattered more than consent, you destroyed the legitimacy of everything you claimed to protect. Voss looked at her with something that might have been pity. You do not understand how kingdoms work, girl. You never did. That is why you were perfect for my purposes, too broken to resist, too damaged to question. I understand enough to know that you are a coward. Rowan stepped forward despite Elena's attempt to hold her back. You talk about hard choices and necessary evils, but you are just a scared old man who cannot accept that the world moved on without you. Marcus's father might have authorized research, but he never would have authorized torture. He never would have kept prisoners as leverage. You twisted his permission into an abomination, and now you want to murder 78 people rather than face the consequences. Voss's finger tightened on the detonator. Rowan kept walking toward him. Do it, she said. Blow up the palace. Kill everyone. Prove that you are exactly the monster we are saying you are. Or put down the detonator and face trial like the soldier you claim to be. The hall was silent except for the sound of her footsteps. 1 step, 2, 3. She was within arm's reach of Voss now. You would not understand, Voss said, but his voice was shaking. I did this for the kingdom. Everything I did was for the kingdom. No, Rowan said gently. You did this because you were afraid. Afraid that mate bonds would disrupt your plans. Afraid that you would lose control. Afraid that the world would change and you would not matter anymore. I understand that fear. I lived with it for 6 years. But fear does not justify what you did to me. It does not justify what you did to all those other prisoners, and it does not justify murdering innocent people now. She reached out slowly. Voss did not move. She placed her hand over his on the detonator. Let it go, she said. Please, just let it go. For a moment, Voss looked like he might refuse. Then something in his face crumbled. The facade of calm control broke, and what remained was just a tired old man who had lost everything. He released the detonator. Rowan took it carefully, handed it to Elena. Voss sank to his knees. His guards lowered their weapons. It was over. Marcus walked over to his former mentor and looked down at the man who had served his father and betrayed his kingdom. Richard Voss, by my authority as Alpha King, I arrest you for treason, torture, and conspiracy against the crown. You will face trial before the full council. You will answer for every prisoner you harmed, every life you destroyed, every trust you violated. Voss looked up at him with hollow eyes. Your father would have understood. My father is dead. Marcus's voice was cold. And I am not him. Guards took Voss away. The palace erupted into chaos as the extent of the conspiracy became clear. Nobles demanding answers. Staff terrified they would be implicated. Media descending on the capital as the story broke across the kingdom. Through it all, Marcus stood in the center of the hall with Rowan beside him and felt the weight of the crown heavier than ever. He had exposed the corruption, arrested the traitor, saved his mate. But he had also learned that his father had authorized the original research, that the kingdom he inherited was built on foundations more rotten than he had imagined. Catherine approached as the immediate chaos settled. Your Majesty, the council is convening emergency session. They want answers. They will get them. Marcus looked at her. All of them. No more secrets. No more delegated burdens. If I am going to be king, I am going to know every dark corner of my kingdom. That is going to make you very unpopular with people who profit from those dark corners. Good. Marcus took Rowan's hand. The mate bond sang between them. Let them be unpopular with me. Catherine smiled. Your father was a great king, but I think you might be a better one, assuming you survive the next few weeks. What happens next? Now? Now we see if Victor Kane was foolish enough to come to the capital for the council session, because I believe he has some questions to answer about funding illegal experiments. He will not come. He will have heard what happened and gone to ground. Then we go after him. Catherine's expression hardened. He violated kingdom law. He conspired with a traitor. He put the entire realm at risk. We make an example of him. Marcus looked at Elena. How long before we can organize a strike force? Give me 3 days. Elena was already typing on her phone. I can have a team ready to move on Kane's compound. 3 days, Marcus agreed. Then we finish this. But as they walked through the palace corridors, now secured by loyal guards, Marcus could not shake the feeling that this was far from over. Kane would not surrender quietly. The council would demand explanations for why a king had committed what looked like treason to expose a Lord Regent. And there were still 42 other prisoners in the deep cells whose cases needed reviewing. The victory felt hollow. That night, in the safe house where they waited for the palace to be fully secured, Marcus found Rowan on the porch again. She was looking at the forest, but her posture was different, less hunted, more hopeful. What are you thinking? He asked. That 3 days ago I was counting ceiling tiles in a cell. Now I am planning to help hunt down a traitorous alpha. It is a lot of change. Regrets? Some. She turned to him. I wish we had met differently. I wish our bond had not been weaponized. I wish I could remember who I was before the drugs. We will figure out who you are now, together. She leaned into him, and they stood there watching the forest and the stars and thinking about the battle still to come. In 3 days, they would go after Kane. In 3 days, they would face whatever forces he had gathered. But tonight, they had this. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, standing together against a world that had tried to tear them apart. It would have to be enough. The summons arrived exactly 3 days after Voss's arrest, delivered by royal courier to the forest estate, where Marcus had been coordinating with his remaining loyal allies. The heavy parchment bore the seal of the High Council, pressed in wax that still smelled faintly of the alchemical compounds used to authenticate official documents that could not be forged without access to the royal crypts. Alpha King Marcus Ashford, the formal script read, you are hereby commanded to appear before the High Council in full session to answer charges of treason, theft of royal property, assault on the Lord Regent's guard, and conduct unbecoming the crown. Session to convene in 3 days at the Grand Hall of the palace you abandoned. Failure to appear will result in formal declaration of abdication and transfer of the crown to the next legitimate heir, by order of the council, witnessed by all 12 territory alphas. Marcus read it twice, then handed it to Elena, who stood at his shoulder reviewing security protocols for an operation that might no longer be necessary. They are forcing you back to the palace, she said, on their ground, their terms, or they are giving me a platform. Marcus replied. 3 days to prepare. A public forum where I can present evidence before every alpha in the kingdom. Voss is in a cell. His guards are being questioned. We have the files. This might actually work in our favor. Or it is a trap, Logan said from where he sat cleaning his rifle, with the methodical care of a man who had been maintaining weapons longer than most of the people in the room had been alive. Victor Kane funded Voss's programs. Kane has half the council in his pocket through bribes or blackmail. You walk into that session and you might walk out in chains, or not walk out at all. Then we make sure I walk out wearing a crown, Marcus said. He looked at the gathered wolves, his inner circle, the people who had risked everything when he made the choice to defy Voss and save his mate. Captain Elena Cross, Lieutenant Sarah Vance, Dr. Halloway, Logan Thorne, And Rowan, who sat quietly by the window, but whose presence through the mate bond was a constant warmth that kept Marcus anchored when the weight of what he was attempting threatened to crush him. "We have 3 days," Marcus continued. "What do we need to win a council session?" "Proof," Sarah said immediately. "Incontrovertible evidence that Voss was acting outside his authority, that the experiments were illegal, that Kane was funding it." "We have that," Elena confirmed. "The files from the vault, the payment records, testimonies from the guards returned, Dr. Holloway's medical analysis of what was done to the prisoners. Allies," Logan added. "Alphas who will stand with you when Kane tries to turn this into a vote of no confidence. Right now, you have Catherine. Who else can we count on?" "Alpha Thomas of the Southern Highlands might support us," Sarah offered. "He lost a nephew in the border wars under circumstances that were never explained. If we can show him evidence that Voss was eliminating witnesses to his programs, he would want justice." "Alpha Rebecca of the coastal territories has no love for Kane," Elena said. "They have been rivals for trade routes for a decade, the enemy of my enemy and all that." "That gives us 3 solid votes out of 12, Marcus calculated. "We need 7 for a majority, 4 more alphas who can be convinced. Or we need to discredit Kane so thoroughly that even his allies abandon him," Rowan said quietly from where she stood by the window. Everyone turned to look at her. She had been silent through most of the planning sessions, still recovering from 6 years of imprisonment. The detox had purged the worst of the chemicals from her system, but the deeper damage took time to heal. Dr. Holloway had been working with her daily, monitoring her progress, watching as her wolf slowly remembered what it felt like to be free of chemical suppression. The first few days after the detox had been the hardest. Rowan had described it as feeling like she was learning to be a person again after years of being a collection of reflexes and survival instincts. Simple decisions felt overwhelming. Choosing what to eat, deciding when to sleep, processing emotions that had been flattened by drugs into gray nothing for so long that feeling them again was almost painful. But she was getting stronger. Each day, a little more color returning to a world that had been black and white. Each day, a little more control over the wolf that had been locked away. Elena had started taking her through combat drills, gentle at first, just to see what remained of her elite soldier training. And Rowan's muscle memory proved stronger than the chemicals had been. Her body remembered forms and movements even when her conscious mind could not recall learning them. Now, 10 days after the extraction from Black Ridge, Rowan was functional in ways that amazed Dr. Holloway and worried Marcus in equal measure. The speed of her recovery suggested that her Grey Fang heritage included more than just prophecy and elemental abilities. It included a resilience that let her heal from traumas that would have broken most wolves permanently. "How do we discredit an alpha who has spent 30 years building his reputation?" Marcus asked. "We prove he is not just corrupt, but incompetent," Rowan said. She walked to the table where they had spread maps and documents and evidence, moving with more confidence than she had shown even yesterday. Kane funded illegal experiments. Why? Not just to control you, though that was part of it. He wanted the research for himself. He wanted to create loyal soldiers he could control. Wolves who would follow his orders without question. If we can prove he was planning a coup, that he was going to use Voss's conditioned guards to overthrow the council, then even his allies will turn on him, because he becomes a threat to all of them. "We suspected that," Elena said, "but we do not have proof, just payment records and circumstantial connections." "Then we find proof," Rowan said. "Where would Kane keep records of a coup plot?" "Not in his main estate," Sarah said. "Too obvious. Council has authority to search Alpha residences during investigations." "A secondary location," Logan mused. "Somewhere he controls absolutely. Somewhere he could store sensitive materials without risk of discovery." "His hunting lodge," Marcus said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. "Kane has a private lodge in the northern mountains. Technically it is in neutral territory between his lands and mine. He uses it for meetings that need to be off the books. I have been there once, years ago when my father was still alive. Security was light because Cain relied on isolation rather than guards. That was years ago, Elena pointed out. He will have upgraded since then. Maybe. But it is still our best option. Marcus looked at his captain. How fast can you put together a team? 6 hours to gear up and brief. We leave tonight, arrive before dawn, search the lodge, and extract before Cain knows we were there. Do it, Marcus ordered. Take whoever you need. But Elena, no unnecessary risks. We get in, we get the evidence, we get out. If it goes wrong, you abort and return. Understood? Understood, Your Majesty. As Elena and Sarah left to organize the operation, Dr. Halloway cleared his throat. Your Majesty, there is another matter we should discuss. He pulled out a leather-bound journal that looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. While cataloging the evidence from the vault, I found this in a section marked Historical Research. It is a genealogical record of the Grey Fang Pack, the royal line that was supposedly eliminated 25 years ago in the Purge. I know the history, Marcus said. The Grey Fang ruled the Eastern Territories before they were accused of practicing dark magic. The Council authorized military action. The entire bloodline was wiped out to prevent the alleged curse from spreading. That is the official history, Halloway agreed. But according to this journal, which appears to be authentic based on the blood magic seals and the handwriting analysis I conducted, the last Grey Fang Alpha had a daughter, born 3 months before the Purge. There is a birth record, and a notation that the child was taken to safety by a trusted servant who disappeared the night the Purge began. Why does this matter now? Logan asked. Because, Halloway said carefully, the birth date matches. The physical description in the later entries matches. And the name listed for the child is Rowan. The room went absolutely silent. Everyone turned to look at Rowan, who had gone very pale. That is not possible, she whispered. I am not royal. I am nobody, a soldier who does not even remember her own family name. You do not remember because you were raised in hiding, Halloway said gently. Because whoever saved you from the Purge kept you secret to protect you. And then, when you joined the military, Voss recognized you. The Grey Fang royal line has distinctive features, violet undertones in the eyes that appear blue in normal light, a specific bone structure. He saw what you were, and he used you. Marcus felt the implications crashing over him like a wave. If Rowan was Grey Fang royalty, if she was the lost heir everyone thought was dead, then she was not just his mate. She was a threat to everyone who had profited from the Grey Fang territories being absorbed into the Crown lands after the Purge. She was a legitimate claimant to 1/6 of the kingdom, and Victor Kane's family, Marcus said slowly, were the ones who led the Purge, who claimed the Grey Fang lands after the royal family was eliminated. If Rowan is the heir, she has legal claim to everything Kane built his power on. Which is why Voss kept me alive, Rowan said, and her voice was shaking. Not just as leverage against you, as insurance. If Kane ever turned on Voss, he could reveal me, destroy Kane's legitimacy. It was a weapon pointed at both of you. Can we prove this? Marcus asked Halloway. The journal provides historical documentation, but we would need blood magic verification, a test that can only be performed by the royal crypt keeper using artifacts from the Grey Fang line. There should be items in the vault beneath the palace, regalia that was sealed after the Purge rather than destroyed. Then we test it, Marcus decided, before the council session, because if Rowan is who this journal says she is, it changes everything. It means the council did not just tolerate Voss's crimes, they tolerated the imprisonment and torture of a legitimate royal heir. That is a scandal that will destroy careers and shift alliances. Rowan was staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. I cannot be a princess. I do not know how to be a princess. You do not have to be anything you do not want to be, Marcus said, taking her hands. But we need to know the truth, for justice, for the prisoners who suffered alongside you, for the kingdom that needs to understand what was done in its name. She looked up at him. and through the mate bond he felt her fear and confusion, and under that, a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "Okay," she said, "test it. Let us find out who I really am." The blood magic test was conducted in the deepest vault of the palace, in a chamber that had not been opened since Marcus's father sealed it after the Grey Fang purge. The royal crypt keeper, an ancient wolf named Matthias, who had served 5 kings and remembered when the Grey Fang still ruled, performed the ritual with hands that shook slightly but never wavered. He used a crown that had belonged to the last Grey Fang queen, a delicate circlet of silver worked with moonstones that had been passed down through 17 generations. The crown had been sealed because destroying it would have been sacrilege, but keeping it visible would have been a constant reminder of the line that was ended. Matthias placed 3 drops of Rowan's blood on the largest moonstone. Then he spoke words in a language older than the current kingdoms, words that made the air vibrate with power that had nothing to do with modern alchemy and everything to do with magic that was woven into bloodlines at a level deeper than DNA. The moonstone began to glow, soft at first, then brighter, until the entire crown was radiating light that cast shadows sharp as knives. Matthias stepped back, his expression grave. The blood recognizes the crown. The crown accepts the blood. He looked at Rowan with something that might have been awe or might have been fear. "You are Rowan Ashera Grey, last living heir of the Grey Fang royal line, daughter of Alpha Kirin and Luna Celeste, the Winter Queen of Prophecy." "What prophecy?" Marcus asked. Matthias gestured to inscriptions on the vault wall that Marcus had never bothered to read. They were in the old language, but now that he looked closely, he could make out enough to understand the general meaning. "Born of blood and winter's night, hidden in shadow, raised in light. When the false king claims the stolen throne, the Winter Queen shall call her people home. Power over ice and storm and snow. The lost shall rise, the corrupt shall fall. The kingdom breaks or stands as one." "That is why they tried to erase you," Matthias said to Rowan. "Not just to control the king, but because the prophecy said you would return, that you would challenge the legitimacy of everything built on your family's ashes." "I do not have power over ice and storm," Rowan said. "I am just a soldier." "You have been suppressed for 6 years," Matthias replied, "drugged to prevent your wolf from fully manifesting. But you are recovering, and if the prophecy is true, your power will come, perhaps when you need it most." Marcus wanted to dismiss it as superstition, but he had just watched a crown glow in response to blood, had felt the magic in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. Prophecies had a way of being self-fulfilling, but they also had a way of being true in unexpected forms. "What do we do with this information?" he asked. "We use it," Logan said. He had been present for the ritual, witness to whatever came next. "We announce it at the council session. Rowan is not just the king's mate. She is legitimate royalty, a victim of a crime that spans decades. Every alpha who profited from the Grey Fang purge will have to answer for it." "Including Cain," Marcus said, "especially Cain." The council session was called for the evening of the 3rd day, but the session was merely the formal proceeding. The real event, the moment when the kingdom would watch and judge, was the royal ball that preceded it, a tradition that dated back 7 centuries to the founding of the unified wolf kingdoms. Before rulers made decisions that would affect thousands of lives, they gathered in celebration. They broke bread and drank wine and danced under chandeliers that had witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. The ball would be held in the grand hall of the palace, the same room where Marcus's father had been crowned 40 years ago and where Marcus himself had taken the oath of kingship 5 years past. A space designed to inspire awe and hold 500 people in comfort. Vaulted ceilings rose 60 feet overhead, painted with murals depicting the great moments of the kingdom's past. The chandeliers were works of art that predated modern alchemy, crafted by artisans dead for 200 years. Crystal and silver worked together in patterns that made the entire hall seem to glow from within. Marble floors polished to mirror shine reflected the lights above. It was also the space where Victor Kane planned to destroy Marcus and claim the throne for himself. Elena's team had found the evidence at Kane's hunting lodge 3 nights ago. Documents outlining a coup in meticulous detail, agreements with alphas who had been promised territory and title, and a timeline that put the decisive move for tonight. Kane would use the ball to publicly challenge Marcus's fitness to rule, would call for a vote of no confidence, and when the council hesitated, Kane would invoke the ancient right of challenge, trial by combat for the crown, the winner takes the throne. Kane was a master combatant, legendary for victories in territorial disputes over 30 years. Marcus was competent, but not exceptional, hindered by old injuries and 5 years spent ruling rather than training. In a fair fight, Kane would probably win, and the combat would be legal, sanctioned by traditions older than the current kingdom, impossible to refuse without looking weak. So Marcus did not plan to fight fair. He planned to fight smart. The ball began at sunset with all the pageantry the kingdom could muster. Alphas arrived in formal attire that spoke to their territories and status. Alpha Thomas of the Southern Highlands came in hunting leathers worked with gold thread. Alpha Rebecca of the coastal territories arrived in blues and silvers that evoked the ocean she governed, flanked by advisors who watched Kane with hostility. Alpha Catherine of the Western Territories, the senior council member who had helped expose Voss, came in formal robes marking her status. She caught Marcus's eye and nodded once, support clear and unambiguous. But Kane had his supporters too. The balance was precarious. 7 alphas leaning toward Marcus, 5 toward Kane, 2 undecided. Nobility from every territory filled the remaining spaces. Diplomats from allied kingdoms, human dignitaries who maintained relations with Wolf Society, their presence a reminder that what happened tonight would have consequences beyond their borders. Marcus entered last, as tradition demanded. He wore the formal regalia of the Alpha King, black silk coat embroidered with silver thread, and the crown heavy and cold, sitting on his head with the weight of 5 centuries of rule. He looked every inch the monarch, but Marcus hated every second of it because the clothes felt like a costume and the crown felt like a target. But beside him walked Rowan, and she took his breath away and silenced the hall in one stunning moment. She wore a gown that Elena had commissioned from the finest dressmaker in the capital. Midnight blue silk that flowed like water, catching light and shadow. The cut was elegant from the front, high-necked and formal, but the back was completely open from neck to waist, exposing every scar, every mark of torture, every brand that Voss had burned into her skin over 6 years. She wore her trauma like armor, daring anyone to look away, forcing them to see what had been done in the name of kingdom security. And on her head was the gray fang crown, the moonstone circlet that had sat in a vault for 25 years. Now it sat on Rowan's dark hair, its moonstones gleaming with inner radiance. The crowd gasped when they entered. Conversations died. Every eye in the massive hall turned to watch the king and the woman at his side. Marcus led her to the center of the hall, where tradition demanded the first dance before any business could be conducted. The orchestra began playing, a waltz that was older than the current kingdom. They had not practiced. There had been no time. But Rowan followed his lead with the instinctive grace of someone whose body remembered training, even when her mind could not recall the lessons. They moved together, and through the mate bond, Marcus felt her fear and her determination in equal measure. "You are doing perfectly," he murmured. "I feel like I'm going to vomit," she replied. "Everyone is staring. Let them stare. You are magnificent." The dance ended. Applause, polite and measured. Then Alpha Catherine stepped forward, her role as senior council member giving her authority to speak first. "Alpha King Marcus," she said formally, "you stand accused of serious crimes against the kingdom. Before we proceed to formal session, is there anything you wish to say to this assembly?" "Yes," Marcus replied. His voice carried through the hall, strong and clear. "I wish to introduce my mate, Rowan Ashera Gray. last surviving heir of the Grey Fang royal line, a princess who was imprisoned and tortured in my palace for 6 years while the council looked the other way. The hall erupted, shouts of disbelief, demands for proof. Kane's face went purple with rage. "Lies!" he roared. "The Grey Fang line was eliminated. This is a desperate ploy by a desperate king." The blood magic test was performed by Royal Crypt Keeper Matthias, Marcus said calmly. The crown of the Grey Fang queens accepted her blood. The prophecy recognized her. Unless you wish to claim that blood magic and prophecy and the traditions we have followed for 1,000 years are suddenly invalid. Kane opened his mouth, then closed it. He could not dismiss blood magic without undermining the very foundations of their society. "Even if she is Grey Fang," another alpha called out, "that does not excuse your crimes, Your Majesty. You still stole a prisoner. You still defied the Lord Regent." "I rescued my mate from illegal imprisonment," Marcus corrected, "and I exposed a conspiracy that involved the current Lord Regent and," he looked directly at Kane, "the Alpha of the Eastern Territories." He nodded to Elena, who began projecting images on the massive screens that had been installed for the presentation. Documents from Kane's lodge, payment records, communications discussing the coup, plans to use Voss's conditioned soldiers to overthrow the council. Kane had been funding Voss's experiments, Marcus continued, not to help the kingdom, to build his own private army, to prepare for the day when he would challenge for the throne. That day, apparently, is today. Kane's supporters were backing away from him now, the evidence too damning to dismiss. But Kane himself just smiled. "So you found my insurance policy," he said. "Clever. But it changes nothing. You are still unfit to rule. You compromised kingdom security for a woman. You put personal feelings ahead of duty. You are weak, Marcus, just like your father was weak. This kingdom needs a strong king, someone who will make the hard choices." He stepped forward and the crowd parted before him like water. "I invoke the ancient right of challenge," Kane declared. "Trial by combat for the crown. You and me, Marcus, right here, right now. The kingdom watches. The strong survive. The weak fall." The hall went silent. Every eye turned to Marcus. This was the moment. The trap Kane had been building toward. Marcus could refuse, but that would mark him as a coward and lose him the throne anyway. Or he could accept and likely die, because Kane was a killer and Marcus was hindered by injuries that never quite healed right. "I accept," Marcus said, "but under one condition." Kane raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "If I win, you confess everything. Every bribe, every conspiracy, every wolf you killed or had killed to build your empire. You face justice with no protection of rank or title." "And when I win," Kane said, "you abdicate. You walk away from the crown, and your mate becomes my prisoner. I will finish what Voss started." "Agreed," Marcus said, though the words tasted like poison. They cleared the center of the hall. Guards established a formal circle marked by ancient symbols that would contain the combat and prevent outside interference. The rules were simple. Shift or stay human, as you preferred. Use any natural weapons. Fight until one submitted or died. The winner took all. Kane shifted immediately, his wolf form massive and scarred from decades of combat. Easily 160 pounds of muscle and fury and killing intent. Marcus stayed human. His wolf form was strong but not exceptional. His strength had always been in tactics, not raw power. And he had one advantage Kane did not expect. As Kane charged, Marcus dropped and rolled, coming up with a silver blade that had been hidden in his formal jacket. It was legal under challenge rules. Any weapon you could carry undetected was fair game. Kane skidded to a stop, reassessing. Marcus did not wait. He moved in fast, using the blade to keep Kane at a distance, forcing the larger wolf to respect the silver edge that could wound even an alpha. They fought across the marble floor, Kane using speed and power and the reach advantage of wolf form, Marcus using footwork and the blade and the bitter knowledge that if he lost, everyone he loved would suffer. The fight seemed to last forever and also happened in a heartbeat. Marcus landed a cut across Cain's shoulder. Cain retaliated with claws that opened Marcus's side. Blood on marble. Gasps from the crowd. Logan shouting encouragement. Elena calculating angles for intervention if the rules were broken. Then Cain made a mistake. He overcommitted to a lunge, thinking Marcus was too injured to dodge. Marcus sidestepped, brought the blade down hard into Cain's back leg, severing the tendon. Cain went down howling, shifted back to human on instinct, clutching his leg. Marcus stood over him with the blade at his throat. "Yield," Marcus commanded. "Never," Cain spat. "Kill me or I will hunt you until one of us is dead." Behind Marcus, Rowan spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall with a weight that made everyone turn to look. "No," she said. "He does not get to die a warrior. He does not get an honorable end." She walked into the circle, ignoring the rules about interference, and nobody stopped her because the gray fang crown on her head and the scars on her back gave her an authority that transcended written law. She knelt beside Cain and placed her hand on his wounded leg. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature in the hall dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost formed on the marble floor, spreading out from Rowan in a circle that grew wider with each passing second. The chandeliers above began to swing as wind that came from nowhere and everywhere gusted through the enclosed space. Rowan's eyes were glowing, not the warm amber of wolf eyes, but pure silver white like moonlight on snow. The prophecy had been right. She had power, and it was waking up. "The Winter Queen shall call her people home," Matthias whispered from the crowd. "The lost shall rise." Rowan stood, and the wind intensified. Ice crystals formed in the air, glittering in the light from the chandeliers. Her voice, when she spoke, echoed with harmonics that suggested she was not speaking alone, but with the voices of everyone who had suffered in Voss's cells. "Victor Cain," she said, "you funded torture. You profited from suffering. You built your power on the ashes of my family and the pain of prisoners who had no voice. I claim the right of royal judgment." "The council will decide his fate," someone protested weakly. "I am the Grey Fang heir," Rowan said. "My family ruled these lands for 300 years before they were betrayed. I claim the ancient rights. I claim justice." She raised her hand, and the ice in the air formed into a spear that hung suspended above Cain's chest. The hall held its breath. Then Rowan lowered her hand. The ice spear dissolved into mist. "But I am not my ancestors," she said quietly. "I do not rule through fear and death. So I give you to the council for trial. I give you to the justice system you tried to subvert, and I take from you what you value most." She touched his forehead and power flared. Cain screamed. When she pulled her hand away, his eyes were different, duller. His wolf was gone. Not dead, but sleeping so deeply it would never wake. Cut off from the source of his strength and his immortality. Human in all the ways that mattered. "You wanted the kingdom to be strong," Rowan said. "You wanted wolves who followed without question. Now you are neither wolf nor leader. Now you are just a man who will live out his days knowing he lost everything to someone he called weak." She turned and walked back to Marcus, leaving Cain broken on the floor. The crowd erupted in chaos. Logan pushed through to Marcus's side, already binding the claw wounds with field dressings. "Your Majesty, you are injured." "I am alive," Marcus replied. "That is enough." But it was not Logan's voice that made Marcus turn. It was a sound he knew too well from the border wars. The mechanical click of a concealed weapon being armed. Cain had one more card to play. A pistol, small enough to hide in his formal clothes, already coming up to aim at Marcus's heart. Two things happened simultaneously. Logan threw himself in front of Marcus, taking the bullet meant for the king, and Rowan's power exploded outward in a wave that flash-froze everything within 10 feet of Cain, including the gun, including Cain himself, encasing him in ice so thick he looked like a statue. Logan collapsed. Marcus caught him, lowered him to the floor. The old soldier had a hole in his chest that was pumping blood too fast to stop. "No," Marcus said. "No, not you, not now." Logan looked up at him with eyes that were already fading. "Tell them," he rasped. "Tell them we stood for something." "I will," Marcus promised. Logan smiled, then his eyes closed and did not reopen. The hall was silent except for Rowan's ragged breathing as she fought to control power that wanted to keep expanding, to freeze everything, to make the pain stop through the terrible simplicity of ice that felt nothing. Marcus stood, still holding Logan's body, and looked at the assembled alphas and nobles and dignitaries who had come to watch a king fall and instead witness something that would be talked about for generations. "This is what your policies cost," he said. "Good wolves dead, prisoners tortured, a kingdom divided against itself. And for what? To maintain control? To prevent the chaos of wolves choosing their own mates?" His voice rose. "We are not animals to be trained and controlled. We are people, and people deserve the right to choose their own paths, even if those choices complicate politics." He laid Logan gently on the floor and took Rowan's hand. Her power was still manifesting, frost spreading across the marble, but his touch seemed to anchor her. The ice stopped spreading. "I propose new laws," Marcus continued. "No imprisonment without trial, no experimentation without consent, no suppression of mate bonds for political convenience. And any alpha who violates these laws will face justice regardless of rank or territory or how much power they think they have accumulated." "The council will need to vote," Catherine said. "But, Your Majesty, I think you will find support." One by one, alphas came forward. Some because they believed in what Marcus was proposing, others because they had seen what happened to Cain and did not want to be next. But they came forward, and they gave their support. It was not unanimous, it was messy and political and imperfect, but it was progress. The tribunal took 2 weeks to organize and another 3 to complete. Voss faced justice before a panel of alphas from neutral territories who had no stake in protecting him or destroying him. He was given the opportunity to defend his actions, to present his reasoning, to explain why he believed everything he did was necessary. He did so with calm eloquence, never apologizing, never showing regret, simply explaining that kingdoms required hard choices and that someone had to make them. The tribunal found him guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment in a facility far from the capital, with no possibility of parole or pardon. Not execution, because Marcus had argued that killing Voss would make him a martyr to those who believed the ends justified the means. "Let him live," Marcus had said. "Let him watch while we dismantle everything he built and prove that kingdoms can be governed without torture. That is the harshest punishment we can give him." Cain faced similar judgment. The list of his crimes was extensive enough that the trial took 8 days. He was convicted of conspiracy, funding illegal experiments, attempted coup, and murder. The council voted for execution. But because his wolf had been stripped, because he was functionally human now, the execution was stayed pending appeal to human courts who had jurisdiction over non-supernatural crimes. It was a technicality that would keep him in prison for years, while lawyers argued about which justice system had authority. Marcus thought that was fitting. Cain had built his life on exploiting loopholes and technicalities. Now he would die old and forgotten in a cell, buried under the very bureaucracy he had once manipulated. The prisoners from Black Ridge were released and offered compensation. Some accepted. Others wanted nothing to do with the kingdom that had failed them. Marcus let them choose because choice was the entire point. Dr. Halloway established a treatment program for wolves who had been subjected to Voss's conditioning. 12 were recovered enough to rebuild their lives. 8 were too damaged and would require permanent care. Marcus ensured they received it, funding the facility from his personal accounts rather than the kingdom treasury, because this was his failure and his responsibility to fix. 6 months after the ball, the palace held another ceremony. Not a trial or a judgment, but a celebration that the kingdom had been preparing for since the night Rowan's blood awakened the Grey Fang crown. The coronation of Rowan Ashera Grey as Luna Queen of the Northern Kingdom, and recognized heir of the Grey Fang royal line. A moment that would mark the official unification of 2 bloodlines that had once ruled separate territories and would now govern together. The ceremony was held in the same grand hall where the trial by combat had taken place, but the space had been transformed. Where blood had stained marble 6 months ago, now flowers bloomed in arrangements that spoke to both the Northern Kingdom and the Grey Fang legacy. Winter roses in white and silver for the prophecy of the Winter Queen, mountain heather in purple and blue for the Grey Fang colors that had not been displayed publicly in 25 years, and nightshade blossoms in midnight blue to match the gown Rowan had worn when she first appeared before the court, wearing her scars like armor. Every seat was filled. The 12 territorial alphas in their formal robes, symbols of the unified kingdom that had chosen reform over tradition when it mattered. Nobility from every region, many of them wearing the colors of the Grey Fang in open acknowledgement of what had been taken and what was being restored. Human diplomats representing governments that had watched the internal struggle with concern and were now witnessing the peaceful resolution that gave them confidence in continued treaties. And in the front rows, the wolves who had made this possible. Captain Elena Cross in her Royal Guard dress uniform, medals from the border wars gleaming on her chest. Lieutenant Sarah Vance beside her. Dr. Halloway, who had saved Rowan's life during the detox and later provided the medical evidence that helped convict Voss. And an empty seat draped in black, a memorial for Logan Thorne, who had died protecting the king and would forever be remembered as a hero of the Reformation. Rowan stood before the assembled court in a gown of silver and white that had been designed specifically for this moment. The fabric shimmered like starlight, catching every movement and making her seem to glow from within. Her hair had been woven with winter flowers and small crystals of ice that she had created herself during practice sessions with the royal alchemists who were helping her learn to control the power that had awakened at the ball. The elemental abilities that came with her Grey Fang heritage, the prophecy made manifest in ice and winter wind, and the ability to bring temperatures down with a thought. But it was her eyes that held everyone's attention. No longer the dull, flat affect of someone whose emotions had been chemically suppressed for 6 years. Now they were alive, sharp, gleaming with intelligence and determination, and the quiet strength of someone who had survived hell and chosen to build heaven from the ashes. Marcus stood beside her wearing his formal regalia as Alpha King, but this ceremony was not about him. This was about the woman who had been erased and was now being acknowledged, about the bloodline that had been ended and was now being restored, about the kingdom choosing to honor its past mistakes by making them right in the present. Royal Crypt Keeper Matthias, ancient and wise and keeper of traditions that predated the current kingdom, performed the ritual with hands that shook slightly but never wavered. He had served 5 kings and remembered when the Grey Fang still ruled. When Rowan first came to him for the blood magic test, he had wept to see the lost line return. Now he spoke the words of binding with a voice that carried the weight of centuries. "Do you, Rowan Ashera Grey, last daughter of the Grey Fang royal line, accept the responsibility and the burden of leadership? Do you swear to serve this kingdom with wisdom and compassion, to use your power for protection and not for conquest, to remember that the crown is a weight to be carried and not a weapon to be wielded?" "I swear," Rowan said, and her voice carried through the hall with the certainty of someone who had earned every word. "Do you swear to protect the weak and challenge the strong when they abuse their power, to be the voice for those who have no voice and the champion for those who have no champion? To remember that you were once powerless and use that memory to guide your decisions when you have power over others?" "I swear," she repeated, and Marcus felt the mate bond sing between them with pride and love and the knowledge that she meant every syllable. "Do you swear to honor the memory of those who came before? The Grey Fang line that was ended, and the prisoners who suffered in cells beneath this very palace, to ensure that their pain was not meaningless and their sacrifice was not forgotten, to build a kingdom worthy of their memory?" "I swear," Rowan said for the 3rd time. and tears tracked down her face, but her voice never wavered. "Then by my authority as royal crypt keeper and keeper of the ancient traditions," Matthias said, "and by the witness of this court, and by the blessing of our people, and by the power vested in me by the blood magic that binds us all, I recognize you as Luna Queen of the Northern Kingdom and rightful heir of the Greyfang legacy. May your reign bring winter's clarity to those who would obscure truth, and spring's renewal to those who have suffered injustice." Marcus stepped forward with the Luna crown, the mate's crown that had been commissioned specifically for this moment. It was a work of art that had taken master craftsmen 3 months to create. Silver worked with moonstone and diamonds, incorporating elements of both the Northern Kingdom and the Greyfang royal symbols. Where the 2 crowns touched, they would resonate with the blood magic that recognized both bloodlines. Marcus placed the crown on Rowan's head with hands that were absolutely steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. The crown settled into place with a soft chime like bells in winter wind, and where it touched the Greyfang circlet she already wore, light flared, not harsh or blinding, but soft and warm and welcoming, the 2 crowns accepting each other. 2 bloodlines unified, past and present becoming future. The court erupted in applause that went on for minutes, genuine and heartfelt in a way that political ceremonies rarely achieved. Because this was not just about acknowledging Aluna. This was about the kingdom publicly admitting that it had been wrong, that it had allowed terrible things to happen, and that it was choosing to be better. That night, after the ceremony and the feast, and the endless receiving line of alphas, offering congratulations and alliances and all the political maneuvering that came with power, Marcus and Rowan found themselves alone on the palace balcony overlooking the city. "Do you ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "Everything you gave up to save me?" "I gave up nothing I wanted to keep," Marcus said. "A throne built on torture and lies is not worth having. We built something better, something that will last. We lost Logan, we lost Owen, we lost so many people." "We did, and we honor them by making their sacrifices mean something, by building a kingdom they would be proud to defend." They stood together watching the city lights below, wolves going about their lives unaware of how close they had come to living under a very different kind of rule. "What do you think happens next?" Rowan asked. "Now?" Marcus pulled her close, the mate bond singing between them. "Now we do the boring work of governing, making policies, reviewing budgets, attending council sessions where people argue about trade routes and tax rates. Sounds terrible. It is, but we do it together. And every time it gets overwhelming, we remember what we fought for. The right to choose, the right to be seen, the right to matter." She leaned into him, and they stood there as the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and clean and new. 7 months ago, Rowan had been counting ceiling tiles in a cell, believing she was worth nothing and deserved less. Now she was a queen with ice in her veins and fire in her heart, standing beside the mate who had chosen her even when choosing her cost him everything. The kingdom was not perfect. It probably never would be, but it was better than it had been, and tomorrow they would make it better still. That was enough. That had to be enough. Behind them, the palace glowed with light and music, and the sound of people celebrating not just a coronation, but a transformation. The old guard had fallen. The new order was rising. And at the center of it all, 2 people who had found each other in the darkest place imaginable and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. The Winter Queen and her king, the kingdom that was learning to be worthy of them. The story was far from over. But this chapter, at least, had a happy ending.